right, hello and welcome. Have a question for you. How many have been in this situation? I think just judging by what we had talked about earlier, I think I know the answer to this question. How many of you have been in a situation where you know that something in your business has to change? And you know it, and you have the data to back it up, and you present the data, and it falls flat, and nothing happens? You're in the right place. So the reason why, there are lots of reasons why that happens. A lot of the big reason why is because it's the way that we communicate data. Sometimes what happens is that we get so focused on the number, the statistics, that there's nothing to back it up. There's no call to action, and it just falls flat. And in today's day and age where we have so much data, it can be overwhelming. And we have so much data that it gets unused, underutilized, and there's no action behind it. So that's why we're here today. And in this masterclass, we're going to talk about data storytelling. And I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm Heather McDaniel. I am the founder of Bridge Marketing and Insights. And I'm an independent marketing consultant and data storytelling trainer and data literacy trainer. And I've spent about 20-ish years, and actually more than that, in sales and marketing. I've worked on political campaigns where data is necessary. I've worked in telecom companies. Again, marketing data is absolutely necessary. And for fun, I love photography, football, and I'm learning how to play paddle. Not quite good at it yet, but I'm still learning. So I have a question for you. When you hear data storytelling, what comes to mind? A couple of words. Selling, okay. Anything else? Anybody else? When you hear data storytelling? Social proof? Okay. Anyone else? Okay. All right. So data storytelling, oh, wrong click. There we go. Data storytelling is how we communicate meaning, how do we communicate background information, and the why behind the numbers. And the reason why that's important is, again, because giving information is no longer enough. We can throw out statistics. Who's going to remember them? If I tell you that 83% of people are on the other side of the street, are you going to remember that in about an hour? No. But if I tell you a story about somebody who crossed the street and stayed there for an hour, will you likely remember that? Probably. So that's why data storytelling is really important these days. And again, it's about the why behind the numbers. Now, there's also a lot of confusion about what data storytelling is not. Data storytelling is not a dashboard. A dashboard is great if you want to communicate what is happening in the business, if you want to communicate a lot of information. It's granular. You can get into a lot of depth and detail. A data story is usually 1 to 2 data points, and again, it explains the why, gives a context. It's also not telling a story or not having an agenda and finding the data to back it up. Because we all know our egos can get in the way a little bit, and we can have our own agenda, find the data to back it up. That's not a data story. And finally, it's not a pretty visual. Well-designed visuals don't tell stories unless there's meaning behind it and unless there's a why behind it. So just a couple of things to be aware of. And one thing I do want to point out is that you don't always need to have a data story. You want to look at a few things when you're presenting a data story, whether you need one or not. The first thing is, what is the end goal? Do you want to create action? Do you want to inform? Do you want to elicit some kind of emotion? What do you want people to do, think, or feel? In that case, a data story would be great. Another thing to think about is, are you dealing with complex data? Data stories are great at breaking down complex ideas, complex data. And another area is, what does the audience know about the data that you're presenting? If they don't have an understanding of what you're presenting, you're going to need to provide additional background information, and you're going to need to provide a little bit more meaning behind the numbers, the why behind the numbers. And so if you have to elicit emotion or action, use a data story. If you want to deal with complex data, use a data story. And if you want to give the audience a little bit more information, use a data story. Now let's talk about the elements of a data story. We often hear that a data story is a visual, it's a narrative, and obviously we have the data, because we can't create a data story without the data. But there are two areas that I want to point out that are really critical. The first is the audience, because data storytelling is not about you. It is about the audience. I want you to repeat that. Data storytelling is not about? Come on, you guys I want some energy in here. Come on, it's not about? You. Yes, and it is about the? Audience. Yes, thank you. All right. We're going to get the energy up in here, y'all. All right, we have the data. So with the data, I do want to say that the quality of the data is paramount, because the data that you use is going to drive the decision making. So it's kind of like garbage in, garbage out. If you're using garbage data, you're going to get garbage decisions. And I think by the nods, I'm assuming y'all might have experience with that. All right, and then we have the narrative. The narrative is the glue that holds everything together. This is the structure that we're going to use to tell the data story. And then we have the visualization. One thing I want you to take away about data visualizations is that the more that the audience has to think about what is there, the more likely you are to lose them. So if you have a cluttered chart, you're going to lose them. So we call it cognitive load. So you want to limit that as much as possible. And finally, the call to action. That's what's going to drive what's next, right? Because how often do you present data and nothing happens, right? So we're going to jump in. We're going to go cover each of these steps. And we're going to start with the audience. All right. Don't laugh. I know this is B2B Rocks. And I know that Taylor Swift is not exactly a rock star. However, there is something that we can learn from her. I love this quote because it shows the intimate connection that she has with her fans. She knows, I mean, this is why she has $1 billion empire and why we're all working to create one. So she writes for her fans. She does Easter eggs for her fans. This is why she is so influential. This is why her shows sell out, because she has that incredible connection with the audience. Now, you don't need to have that depth of a connection with the audience, but you do need to put them first, because data storytelling is about the audience. Yes. All right. Well done. All right. So how do we get to know our audience? And if you want to take a picture, you're more than welcome to. And if you don't get information from here, it's quite all right. Connect with me. I'm happy to send it. So we want to know a few things about our audience. Who are they? What's their job? What are their priorities? What are their expectations? And most importantly, what are their internal motivations? And by internal motivations, these are the things that you don't really think about. These are the things like, are they afraid to lose their job? Do they not like to look bad in front of their colleagues? Those are the things that you really want to dig under the surface and connect with. Next thing you want to know is, what are the most important data points to them? There might be things that you want to get across, and that's great, but you also want to keep in mind the things that they're expecting and they want to get across. How familiar are they with the data and the topic? And finally, we want to know, how much time do you have, and how are you going to present the data? And that is going to be about you, but it's going to help you when you put the data story together. So we're going to do a little exercise, because this is a master class, and we're going to do some work. All right, so I'm going to give you a scenario. Now, if you have your own scenario, you could do this in your phone, in your head, however you want, but I'm going to give you a minute. And all right, let's say you're presenting to your product development team. Sales are down due to quality. And you need to motivate them and deliver a sense of urgency. I want you to write down just some answers to the questions. And again, if you have your own audience in mind that you want to, you're going to be presenting to, feel free to use them. So I'm going to have you run through the questions, and I can repeat this one more time. You're presenting to the product development team. Sales are down because of quality. You need to motivate them and deliver a sense of urgency. So take a minute, answer these questions. And can everybody see these okay? Yeah. Okay, cool. So you're on the clock. And the goal here is just to get you to start thinking about what it's like to put yourself in the shoes of the audience. That's all we're doing. Don't sweat it. It's all good.
You're presenting to the product development team?
Yeah.
Sales?
It's because sales are down. Okay. Yeah, so you're presenting to your product development team, yeah. And we'll take another 30 seconds. 30 seconds. And 10 seconds. And we'll wrap it up. Okay, so how was that? Just as a fun exercise to start getting you to think about your audience. Not bad, right? But again, it's just getting you to put yourself in their shoes. And you can do this with any audience, no matter who you're presenting to. Whether you're presenting to a board, whether you're presenting to investors or customers, you can use these questions before you present, no matter who. It's going to work. So now that we have our audience down, we're going to talk about data analysis and interpretation. Now, with data analysis, there is something, I'm not going to get too technical here because we only have so much time. And with the technical side, that could be a master class on its own. But I will say this. You want to make sure that your data is clean. You want to make sure that it is from reliable sources. You want to make sure that it's formatted properly. And then as you get into the interpretation part, as you get into the analysis part, this is where the fun starts, at least in my mind. A couple of things to keep in mind. The starting point is when you are starting your analysis, you want to do some self-awareness, because sometimes we can get in our own way. And I talked about having our own agendas earlier. We can certainly bring that into a data analysis. So you want to know, the first thing is, what are your expectations and what are your assumptions? Those are the things that you're automatically going to bring them. You just want to know that you're doing it. The other thing, now this is the critical question, are you willing to have those assumptions and expectations challenged? Or do you need to be right? Sometimes we are a little bit attached to the outcome. Sometimes we really want to be right. We have a point to prove. But we have to have that willingness to be wrong. We have to have that willingness to be surprised. And that's how you get a really good analysis. That's how you get an honest analysis. So that is something that I want to really impart on you as you're doing your analysis. So if you want to write that down, take some notes. I don't have a slide for it. So 2 questions. What are your expectations and assumptions? And are you willing to have them challenged? And hopefully the answer is yes, you're willing to have them challenged. And by the time you're done with your analysis, you want to have a couple of key takeaways. You don't want to have too many key takeaways, because it's going to be a little bit too much for the audience. You want to simplify things as much as possible for them, especially if they're not familiar with your topic or they're not familiar with the data that you're presenting. The more simple it is, the better. So when you come out of your analysis, generally speaking, have 1 to 3 key takeaways and have a couple of supporting points to back them up. And what you can do is you can run them through this list of questions, and you can go ahead and take a picture of this slide, or again, if you're not getting something, feel free to connect with me. So you want to know, oh wait, wrong way. All right, so what do you want them to see? Why do you want them to see it? Are the data points aligned with your business goals? And then you want to know is what do you want them to think, do as a result of the data? And that's going to help you when you deliver your call to action. And then finally, now I talked about the internal motivations earlier. Is it going to trigger an objection? Is it going to trigger some kind of negative reaction or even a positive reaction? Because I don't know about you, but I know I've presented to people. They weren't really happy with the data that I presented because it didn't make them look all that positive. And it's just the data. If things aren't going well, somebody needs to be responsible. And if sometimes it gets a little tricky that way. So you just want to be aware of that ahead of time. So what you can do is in your data story, get them to say yes. Find those little common points where you can get them to say yes. It's classic sales strategy. The more you can get them to say yes, the more you're going to get their buy-in. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Everybody have this? All right, great. So now that we have our analysis, we're going to talk about our narrative. And this is the glue that's going to hold everything together. And with the narrative, I do want to ask you a question. Why do you think that some stories connect and some stories and messages don't really do that well? They don't really connect with people. Lack of emotion? Anybody else? Not aligned with the goals, okay. Anyone else? Any takers?
I think they don't help the audience empathize.
Yeah, the empathy of the audience, doesn't connect on the emotional level, right. Yeah, and the thing with great stories is that they keep people invested in the outcome. Think of those stories that are just, you're always wondering, how are they going to end, right? They elicit curiosity, and they have tension, right? Now, here's the €1,000,000 question. We're dealing with data. How the hell are you going to create tension with data, right? And that's the thing. It's like, we're not writing an Oscar-winning screenplay where that you're waiting for character A and character B to fall in love, and you're wondering when that's going to happen. We're dealing with numbers. So how do we create tension, and how do we elicit curiosity? Fortunately, there are some things what I call dramatic devices that we can use in data stories. And these are going to be familiar, but now you can start thinking about them differently in terms of how you put a data story together. And the first one is to compare and contrast. So all we're doing here is comparing data across categories. So here you can see, okay, we have product A, B, and C. Now, the curiosity is, why is product C jumping up in that 3rd month, right? So that's one way you can use compare and contrast. Another way is to compare data sets. Super simple. So in this case, we're looking at Team A and Team B. And the curiosity is, why is Team A doing so much better, right? Now, another way we can do this is with annotations. With annotations, what we're looking at is, okay, we have these outliers. We have these unexpected results. I wonder why that is. And again, eliciting curiosity. And it's another way to create tension. Trends, so showing trends over time. Showing sudden changes, so sudden increase, sudden decrease. Showing these trends over time. thresholds is another way, especially if you're using goals and objectives. So again, wondering, why did we make our goals? Why did we not? That's another way. And another way, so this is one way we could show thresholds. The other way is to use a gauge chart, something like this. So again, we're showing that we're falling short of a goal. Why is that? And finally, we have annotations. And I like using annotations to highlight different areas where there are sudden changes. But annotations are really good, and we'll get to this a little bit in the data visualization part, to show why something happened. So again, this is just a nice little way to go about doing it. So now that we have our attention, we're going to go into frameworks, because now, how do we put these things together? We have our audience, we have our data, we have an idea in terms of how to create tension with the data points that we have. How do we put them together? And I'm going to show you 3 frameworks to use. And these are based off of business presentation frameworks, so you can use these in business presentations as well. And one is a classic storytelling framework. So let's jump in. We're going to use the SCQA framework, and this stands for Situation, Complication, Question, and Answer. This was developed by Barbara Minto, who was a consultant at McKinsey, and she wrote a book called The Pyramid Principle. In her book, she talked about different frameworks, and this is an offshoot of one of those frameworks, the pyramid framework. And so with this, so we're going to walk through this. So with the situation, we're talking about the setup, right? So this is the initial, this is what's happening here. The complication is the challenge. Okay, we have this challenge. Why is it happening? The question is, how are we going to fix it? And then you answer your own question. So don't worry, I have an example, so we can walk through this real quick. And just, now I'm going to forewarn you with my examples. They're very high level, they're super basic. And all they are is just to illustrate how the structure works. Don't get too hung up on them, please. All right, so here's a situation. I have a company, and as of right now, we have 6 product releases a year, new feature releases. That's the situation. The complication is that our competitors have more frequent feature releases. So that's part of the complication. The second part of the complication is that we're losing market share because of it. Our customer feedback is telling us that they're losing trust in our company because our feature releases aren't as frequent. They think that we're going to go under. And then the question is, how do we increase our product frequency releases, our product feature releases more frequently without burning out our product development team, without losing quality, and keeping those feature releases up? And the answer is to adopt an agile methodology, and with that, we can regain market share in a couple of quarters. So you can see kind of how that framework plays out. So again, situation, complication, question, and answer. All right. Who's ready for the next one? Oh, and I do want to add one thing. This is a really good framework to use if you're doing more direct presentations or more direct storytelling, and it's more action-driven. So if I know in your case you were talking about, okay, I really want to deliver action. This is a great framework to use to do that. And you could probably see how that would play out in a couple of scenarios where you just want to get to that action point and do so quickly. If you need something more narrative-driven, now if you're in marketing, you would probably appreciate this one. And this is the hero's journey. The hero's journey was developed, and this is a classic storytelling framework. This was developed by Joseph Campbell. And he was a professor. He studied traditions and he studied myths and legends across traditions, across different cultures. And he found that there were commonalities across all of them. And he created this hero's journey framework. In that journey, he found that there are 17 common steps that the hero takes. Fortunately for us, Hollywood found out about this. And so if you know Star Wars, if you know Lord of the Rings, if you know Harry Potter, they all have this framework. And you can see this play out. And so with this, what we have is the departure, the initiation, and the return. And because Hollywood kind of adopted this, fortunately, they broke down the 17 steps into 3. So we're very fortunate that we're going to only play with 3 today. And so with the departure, so if you think about Star Wars, you think about Luke on Tatooine. He's working for Uncle Owen, and he's living this mundane life. He gets this call to adventure, and the call to adventure is R2-D2 coming through with the hologram of Princess Leia. And he's like, oh, do I answer that call to adventure? What do I do with this? Do I leave Tatooine? What do I do? He finds a mentor in Obi-Wan Kenobi. And with his mentor, he answers that call to adventure. And so that is the first phase. That is the departure. In the initiation, our hero will go through a series of tasks and challenges. And what will happen is that they'll learn along the way. And you can probably think of Harry Potter, how he did that. And the same thing with Star Wars, how Luke was starting to become a Jedi. He was doing his Jedi training. And then he defeats the enemy. And in Star Wars, that's blowing up the Death Star. And then in the return, the hero goes home, but they're transformed. This is a story of transformation, right? And so now the question is, okay, how do we do this with a data story, right? So now we have, I want you to meet Melissa. Melissa is a small business owner, and she loves her work, but she also finds that there's a lot of detail that she has to deal with. She spends so much time on manual tasks that it takes away from the work that she loves. And as a matter of fact, she spends about 40% of her time on manual tasks. So at this point, she's not happy in her work, but she does it because what else is she going to do? Now, she did learn about our software, and she's hesitant to try it out because she doesn't want another subscription. She doesn't want to have something else to learn. Now, fortunately, she did come across a colleague who uses our software, and she decided to take a trial. And because of that, she started to learn our software. And then in the first month during that trial, she implemented our SaaS solution. And then all of a sudden, her productivity increased. She spent less time on manual tasks. And over 6 months after signing up, she went from 40% of her time spent on manual tasks to 11%. And now she loves going into the office every day. Now she's happy with her work. She gets to do the work that she loves every single day because of our SaaS product. So you can see the structure. I'm out of character now. So you can see the structure of the departure, which is she was going into the office every day, and she didn't like it. She was spending too much time on manual tasks. She took a trial. Then the next phase, in the initiation, she started to learn. She started to implement features, and she started to see results. And then she started to really see results over the 6 months. And then in the return, she loves going into the office every day. So that is how that framework works. And with this is a great way to connect people with data. So in terms of sales, you could use this as social proof. You can use this as marketing material. You can use this pretty much in any situation where you want to connect people with data. Does that make sense? Okay, great. And then we have SEQA, which is a really direct one. This is a really narrative-driven framework. So what if you want to have something that kind of falls in the middle? Fortunately, I have a plan for that. And this one's going to be a little bit obvious. Past, present, future. So we talk about the past, we talk about the present, and we talk about the future. And that's a very simplistic way. But what it's great at doing is you can use this to, if you need to paint a very rosy picture, a very hopeful future, this framework is a really great way to do that. So let's take a look at past, present, future in action. Okay, so let's say I'm pitching to investors. And in the past, we went from 5 million euros of revenue in year 1. In year 2, we doubled that to 10. And in the future, we're going to triple that to 40 with Series B investment. But here's the thing, is that, again, we're showing the past, we're showing the present, and we're showing the future. And the thing is that, again, this is a great way to create that hopeful future. And I do want to say, I don't know if anybody plans on pitching to investors anytime soon. If you do, with this kind of example, please be realistic. Please acknowledge the risks. Please talk about the competitive environment. And you don't want to paint an overly optimistic picture, because let's face it, you could lose credibility from that. Now, here's a question. Now, what if you're in a position where you have to motivate your team and you're presenting negative data? It's really hard to present negative data and motivate people, right? There's one way to do it, which is, well, if we don't pick up sales in the next 6 months, we're all going to lose our jobs. You're going to lose your audience right there, and they're going to have their resumes out the door by the end of close of business. So how do you inspire them? How do you motivate them? One way to do it is to use this framework. So as an example, let's say that we need a sales rebound. So let's say in 2019, from 2019 to 2022, our sales have gone through the roof. We've been able to increase year over year. In 2023, we had increased competition. And that's impacted our sales, unfortunately. We've had about a dozen competitors come into the market, and we really need to make some changes here. Now, I know that we have the best team in-house, and I know that together, if we pull together, we can make this happen. We can create that better future for ourselves. And what we can do is with this projection, we can actually rebound our sales in the next year. But again, it's going to take every single one of us. And again, that's how you create that rosy picture. It's that real, yes, get their buy-in, yes, believe in them. And that's the buy-in for your teams. Instead of the fear, we're going to lose our jobs. All right, so with this, when do we use these frameworks? Again, SEQA is very direct. It is really action-driven. And again, if you need to deliver the action, use SEQA, situation, complication, question and answer. If you want something inspirational, something motivational, really that emotional connection, connecting people with data, use the hero's journey. And past, present, future is to show progress over time. It falls somewhere in the middle. You can really use it as an action device, or you can use it as a bit more narrative as well. It'll work in either case. So those are 3 basic frameworks to use. And here's the great thing about these frameworks. You really can't go wrong with any of them. You might get stuck deciding, oh, which one should I use? You can't go wrong. What you will find is that one framework might work better than the other. So what you can do, and if you like storyboarding, if you like Post-it notes, what you can do is write everything down on a Post-it note, write down certain points on a Post-it note, or on several Post-it notes rather, and just line them up. How would this look in SEQA? How would this look in past, present, future? And you can get a sense of the story just by moving those Post-it notes around. And it's a classic way of storyboarding. Now let's talk about data visualization, because now at this point we have our audience, we have our data, we have the narrative now. The data visualization, the purpose is twofold. You want to support your story with the visualization, And you want people to think about the visualization as little as possible. The more that they have to think about what this visualization is about, the more likely you are to lose them. And again, I can't say that enough. So if they have to think, they're done. So is your story. So what I like to do is I like to take my inspiration from photography. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm an avid photography person, and this is a hobby of mine. I take inspiration from Ansel Adams. Ansel Adams was really interesting because, now this picture is from 1936. He didn't have access to Photoshop, and he didn't have access to Lightroom. Well before his time. And so he created these beautiful images without those tools. There was no AI, right? And it wasn't the majestic landscapes that I really fell in love with. The more I learned about his work, the more interested I became in his work in the darkroom. What he did brilliantly was that he was very deliberate about what he wanted you to see. And in the darkroom, what he would do is he created techniques called dodge and burn. And he would deliberately lighten up some areas and darken some areas. So he would draw your eye to right where he wanted you to see. And he was very deliberate about that, and that was his art. And there was just something so incredible about that, especially with the technology that he had in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And you can take that same inspiration in your data visualizations. So when you know exactly like the one thing that you want your audience to take away with your visualization, you can create it around that. So your visualization is really about what you want your audience to see. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So how do we do that? There are certain things that we can do to draw the eye. And the first thing is with color. Now, we want to make sure that we use color wisely. Now, if we look at the example on the top, how much is the audience going to have to think to figure out what's going on? They're going to have to think about it quite a bit, right? They're going to have to think about, what is this? What am I looking at here? Whereas on the bottom, you can see I have these transparent, and your eye goes right to here. That's a beautiful use of color if you want to isolate one particular data point, right? So use color wisely. The next thing we want to do is our labels and our titles, because we could go a little bit overboard with the labels, as we can see on the top. So on the top, let's talk about the titles. On the top, we have load times and conversions Q1. Not exciting, not inspiring. I like to use titles as an opportunity to write a headline, because that's going to gauge people, that's going to tell people what they're looking at, right? It's almost like a supporting point. It draws people in. And you don't have to be clickbaity about writing the headline either. So it's basically, okay, there's a difference between load times and conversions Q1, and conversion drops when load times increased. And again, that's another way you can create that curiosity too, and support the curiosity in your story. And so with the labels, you can see the difference between the two. The more simple you can keep your labels and your legends, the better off you are. So you can see here, it gets a little clunky and complicated. You don't need all of this information, right? You don't need the grid lines. You don't need the summary here. You don't need the legend. Just simplify as much as you can, okay? And another thing that we can do, I talked about clutter. Who wants to tell me what's going on here, because I can't tell you? How many of you have seen something like this and thought like, ooh, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be looking at, right? We've all lived that reality. The thing is that we can minimize our clutter as much as you can. The best way to do this is to come back to, okay, what is the one thing that I want my audience to see? And that will help simplify your visualization, because then you can start thinking, okay, well, if I want my audience to see, category 8 at the top, do I really need these 25 other categories or 15 other categories at the bottom? Probably not, right? So then we could start to think about, okay, what do I not need? Believe it or not, data visualization, good data visualization is more about what you can take away than what you can add. Because the more that you add, the more that you try to cram everything into one data story or one visualization, the more likely you are to create a lot of clutter. So the more you can simplify, the better off you are. So we have this example. Now, what's a potential solution? So here we just clean that up, telling the same story. We're isolating the top category, category 8. We're leaving a couple of things down here just to show a similar trend. And it's just kind of in the background. Took away some of the labels, redid the title, and it's a lot cleaner than what we were looking at before. So we can go back, and it's a lot cleaner. So again, think about what you can take away when you do your visualization and remove the clutter. Now, if you're looking at this chart, are you thinking that it's something positive or negative? Negative, right? Now, what if I told you it was actually trying to tell something positive? This was actually published in the Irish Times right after the Olympics. And what it is, it's Ireland's position in the medals table since the 2000 games. So in the 2000 games, Ireland was ranked 64th in the Olympic medals table. Out of the 100 some odd countries, they were ranked 64th. 24 years later in Paris, they went up to 14th. So you would think that's an improvement, right? And you would think that if you're looking at this chart, that's not the case. So how do you fix this? What we're going to do is just invert this y-axis here. So it starts from 0 and goes up to 80. So what we're going to do is just reverse it. So you have 80 at the bottom, 0 at the top. I took the liberty to redo that myself. And here you go. So we're showing the upward trend. And the reason why this is important is because we have our own agreement in terms of how we make our associations. So for us, everybody in this room, down equals bad, up equals good. We have associations with different colors. So if you're using red, that usually means in the red. If you're dealing with finance numbers, it's a sense of urgency. If you're dealing with green, it usually means good, money. If you're dealing with finances. Blue is usually a more safe choice in terms of color choices. It's more security, more trust. So that's something to think about as well. And my favorite is, orange, yellow, that's more brighter, cheery, happy. So again, we want to keep in mind the associations that we're using. And again, it comes out to how is the audience going to interpret this? And we want them to think as little as possible. So at this point, when you have your visualization, there's always something to improve. Always. And so take a look at it. Take a moment to take a look at it. And you'll find, what is it that I can take away? Is there anything that I can simplify? Is there something that I can make easier on the audience? Okay? So at this point, we have our audience, we have our data, we have the narrative, we have the visualization, and we're going to wrap things up with the call to action. Now, the call to action is the last piece in the puzzle, and this is probably the most critical if you want to get your audience to buy in, if you want them to take an action. So it goes back to, remember when you did your audience analysis, what do you want them to think, do, or feel? And then we can bring it back into, this is how we're going to create our call to action. So a call to action is super simple. All you're going to do is say, okay, this is based on what I saw, this is my recommendation. And it's going to be action-oriented. And it's going to have a timeline delivered. And then at the end, if you really, there's a difference between telling somebody what to do. We're going to do this, and we're going to do this on Tuesday, and you're going to like it whether you want to or not. That's not going to get buy-in. But if you do say, okay, we're going to implement an agile methodology. We're going to start training in 2 weeks. Do you have any questions? Does that make sense? Just get them a little bit more involved and engaged. And that's how you can help get that buy-in. All right. So how do we put all of this together? We're going to get to work. I know it's the end. I know it's the end. However, we're going to have some fun with this. So we can do this in groups of 2. Yeah, we could do this in groups of 2. This is a networking event after all. So pair up. And what we're going to do is we're going to go step by step. I'm going to give you a scenario. OK? And we're just going to take a minute, go step by step. Don't worry, I'll have the slides up. And what we're going to do is go step by step through the process. And the goal here is to make it as fun as possible. And the goal is also to just implement what you've learned so far, because I know I delivered a ton of information. And let's face it, it's the end of the day. Let's get the energy up a little bit. All right? So here's our scenario. We have a SaaS company called Cloud Boost. We have a product management tool. Our customer churn has increased, and we need to present to the board of directors. Now, the goal here is to get the board to approve funding and provide strategic direction, mostly to approve funding. Okay? So, do you have do you have this down? So the main thing is we're presenting to the board of directors, and we want them to approve funding for the fix that we're going to present them with. And again, this is just for fun. All right, pair up. So we're going to start with the audience when you're paired up. You're an analyst. I mean, come on. Questions? You just thinking it through? Yeah, I mean, honestly, have fun with this. All right, we'll have another minute on the audience, and then we'll jump to the data piece. And if you don't get through the audience piece, it's all good. Again, it's just to get you to start thinking about it, just to start getting you through the process. Have fun with it. All right, we could wrap up the audience now, and we're going to jump into the data. Now, with the data, I'm just going to give you I'm going to give you a list of data points, and your job is to pick out the 3, maybe 4 most important ones that you think are going to be the most relevant to the board of directors. And we'll take a minute to do that. So we have the customer churn rate increased from 5 to 8% in the last quarter. Customer acquisition costs have risen by 15%. Industry average churn rate is 6%. 80% of customers said lack of onboarding support was the main reason for leaving. Implementing a comprehensive solution would cost about 200,000 euros. And remember, your job is to get the board of directors to approve such funding. Hint, hint. And then you have your net promoter score, and your customer lifetime value is 5,000 euros. So go ahead and pick out the most relevant, what you think, 3, maybe 4 data points. How are we doing on time? Okay, great. We'll take another minute, wrap it up. You having fun? Good. Yeah, it's what's that?
2 about the churn rates and 2 about 1 about the onboarding, 2 about the onboarding.
Yeah.
Quite
Yeah, I'll talk about this at the end. I'll tell you what I would think. Yeah, and here's the thing, this is just for fun, but I'll go back and I'll tell you, okay, this is what I would do. This is how I would do it. All right, we got our points. And the next step is the narrative. Now, which framework would you use to put those data points together? Would you use SEQA? Would you use the hero's journey? Or would you use past, present, future? And again, like I said earlier, there's no right or wrong in these. It's just you might find that one would work better than the other. It's just, this is, again, starting to get you to think about it. Start to think about the process. We take another 30-ish seconds or so to wrap it up. All right, so we have our audience, got the data points, we know which narrative, we kind of have an idea of how we're gonna put together. I'm not gonna have you sketch a visualization. I'm gonna leave that part out, but again, at this point you wanna think about how would you present it in a visualization, and then we'll end it with, what would your call to action be? Now in this case, it's kind of obvious with the scenario you're doing an ask. So with an ask, it's going to be a little bit different in terms of how you develop your call to action. You have your data points, and then you make your recommendations. So I recommend this solution. This is how much it's going to be. And then from there, what questions do you have? What's the buy-in? All right, so we can come back now, come back into the room. How was the process? I mean, this is like a lightning round type of process, but how was it for you? Did it kind of get you into the feel of how you would go about creating a data story? That's the purpose of this. And don't take it too seriously, have fun with it. But again, it will give you an idea in terms of the application of what we just talked about. So with that, I do say, I know it's the end of a long 2 days, and I thank you so much for playing. So thanks for playing along and making it fun. So before we jump into Q&A, I do want to talk about one last thing. And that is, you'll notice throughout this presentation, I did not talk about my tech stack. I didn't talk about tools. I have not even mentioned AI, which is kind of a shocker here. And there's a reason, I know, I think I'm like, I'm the anomaly that's like way out here, right? There's a reason for that. What you learn today is going to apply no matter how technology evolves, no matter how AI evolves. So what you learn today, you can take it with you, you can apply it now, in the future, no matter what. Now I know before we get into the question and answer, I'm sure one of the questions will be, how can you use AI to create a data story? Can you do it? Here's my answer. just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean that you should do something. And by that, I mean that AI is a great tool. It can help you clean data. It can help you analyze data and spot trends. But in terms of creating a data story, I don't think that AI is there yet in order to create a story that connects. It doesn't have the depth or the nuance as it is right now. That's my take. I'm sure there are plenty of people here that would disagree, but I'm giving you what I believe. Again, the depth and nuance isn't there, so you really have to create something that connects. So that being said, I do want to say thank you so much for being here. Thanks for participating. Thanks for playing along. And thank you to Matthew in the back for the sound audio engineer. Thank you. And yeah, so we'll open up the floor now to questions. Yes?
I actually do want to know which tools do you usually use for creating your data visualizations with these, like...
Yeah. So all the visualizations that I showed here, I created them myself in Power BI. Okay. Yeah, I use Power BI. You can use Tableau. That's another great tool. What you will find is that there is also like open source tools that I've used that are just as good. What you'll find is it depends on your comfort level. So Tableau is wonderful if you want to create really attractive visualizations. However, there's a really steep learning curve to it. Power BI is great if you want to just jump right in. That's my experience. And so that's what I use and I start with. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I just have a question.
Sure.
Public-facing data stories?
Yes.
So on like social media platforms and
Oh, sure.
internal data stories.
Mm-hmm.
And how you might represent them differently. For example, in TikTok, they're very light on data when they're talking about, well, maybe it's a story based on data.
Yeah.
They won't show any graphs, any figures.
They'll just show the statistics or?
Or they might even just tell a nice story, even just, say about
Okay.
statistics, like, oh, half of the people think this, think that. But that wouldn't fly in a boardroom.
Right.
High-level management.
Right.
But I just think that more and more in companies I've worked with, we're going along that before you needed to show graphs and data to have any kind of, you need to show evidence.
Yes.
I think we're moving away from that to be able to tell a better story.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you've seen that.
You can, yeah, and that's a wonderful point, and thank you so much for asking that question. The fact is that you need to do both. You need to tell a story, but you also need to have something that backs it up. Now, with external-facing stories, it depends on the purpose of the external-facing story. So if it's really that you want to connect with customers, I would say, just off the top of my head, it would be using something like the hero's journey to get people involved and to get them to relate to the hero and that story. Now, with internal-facing, it depends on the purpose again, but it's more likely going to be a little bit more direct or more likely going to be painting that, showing trends over time. So it would be like sticking with the SCQA or the past, present, future frameworks. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Any other questions? Oh, and do we need the mic? Okay. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. Forgot about that. Questions? Any more?
Just one.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, it's a bit borderline, I would say.
Okay.
How to convince top management to simplify, the slides that we provide with some charts and everything, because they want all the details. So a lot of text, analysis, and the charts with all the scales. And it's pretty hard to convince, the top, because I'm working in a huge company, just to say, okay, for the message you want to share, it's not always positive and efficient. So
I want to understand, I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. So is it more about simplifying the data for top management, or is it more about convincing top management to simplify the data that they need?
Yeah, the second one.
Okay. So if you want to convince, let me guess, they want to see everything, and the reality is they need to see like one or two things. You could do a little bit of both. What you can do is create multiple visualizations. It's a little bit more work, but what you can do is just create the simpler visualizations that gives them what they need. And then you can say, okay, these are the things that I know that you're going to want. You don't really need them, but this is the most important thing that you should look at. It's going to depend on the person. And with management, they're used to seeing data in a certain way, right? And so it's kind of like, how do you break them of that habit? The best way to break somebody of that habit is to take baby steps over time. So that would be step one, right? It's to just break down the data. And then you can do a little bit less, and maybe they'll notice. Maybe they won't notice, right?
Yeah, it takes time.
It will
depends
take
on
time.
the people.
Yeah,
Some are really like have fixed mindset, so they don't want to change anything.
Yeah, exactly. So you're gonna have to. It's gonna take a lot more work to break them of that habit, because again, it comes down to like they're so used and accustomed to seeing data in that way. So it's going to be up to you, unfortunately, to present it in a little bit differently and just start with what they need and then follow that up with what they want and what they expect.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Go for it. Let's get the mic over to you. Here, I got it. There you go.
What if you want to, is it on?
Yeah, we got it.
If you want to communicate uncertainty, maybe you don't have a perfectly formed story to tell with your data, or you're actually, you're just figuring things out. You're not at the, you're monitoring a situation. You don't have the end. Final chapter.
See, now we're getting into really tricky territory because isn't data supposed to be all about resolving uncertainty? That's why we use it, right? So how do you introduce, that's a wonderful question. How do you introduce uncertainty into your data story? I think part of it is keeping people curious, but it's also going to be honest, right? You have to be honest in terms of the assessment. Like, this is what we're tracking, this is what we're seeing. We don't know the outcome as of this moment. And maybe you can give like a timeline in terms of when you would expect to have that outcome to ease minds a little bit, give people peace of mind. But at the same time, it's up to them also to be okay with uncertainty. So. Yeah. I mean, you could say this is the story so far, and you could do it like a TV episode and just be like, okay, to be continued into next season, like a cliffhanger, right? I mean, you could do that. Whether or not it flies with the people that you're presenting to, that's another thing. But I think being honest about the uncertainty is going to be the most important thing, and at least acknowledge that. But great question. Anybody else? All right. Sure? All right. All right. So thank you again so much for being here. If you want to connect with me, find me on LinkedIn. You can also scan badges. Thank you again in the back. And thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.